Hello,
Hello.
and welcome to Planet Marzipan, the Fish and Marillion podcast. I'm Mezza, and here's my mate.
Craig Houston.
Hello, welcome to Planet Marzipan. I'm Mezza. I'm here with my good friend,
Craig.
and we have some new blood on the podcast today. We have some
Fresh meat.
Fresh meat. Folks have never been on the podcast before, and one that's never even heard it. So that may be or may not become apparent. So we would like to welcome for the first time Stuart Mitchell.
Hello.
Hello. Emma Mills.
Hello.
Hello. And Taff Jones.
Hello, first time
Hello.
caller, never listener.
There we go. Cat's out the bag already, look. Because you've never been on the podcast before, do you want to explain to folks why you're here, what your credibility is when you first got into the band or Fish? We'll start with Stuart, if that's all right.
I'm not sure there's any credibility, but I got.
No, we've got no credibility, so you're fine. Don't worry about it.
I got into sort of Fish and Marillion about the same time, which would be about 1993-ish. A friend played me. I think it was Vigil, which was, in some ways a strange way of getting in, and then that led on to Holidays in Eden, and sort of started off something that has continued on to this day.
Where was the first time that you saw either Fish or the band?
So first I saw them would be Brave at the Glasgow Barrowlands,
Wow.
night 4, and that's the first time I saw Marillion. First time I saw Fish was a very small gig up in Banff, which was a warm up for a gig I don't think that ever happened.
Oh, okay. Right. What year would that be?
That would have been 94 as well, I think, maybe about April 94. I feel I might be wrong. Maybe the gig did happen, but it was a warm up for Tarlair, I think, one of the Tarlairs, and for some reason I have in my head it didn't happen, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Cool. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Emma, do you want to tell us your story about how you got into the band?
Yes. Firstly, I want to apologise for sounding really rubbish. I'm full of cold, so sorry about my voice. So we're going back to when I was at uni. It was around 96, I think, and a boyfriend at the time played me Warm Wet Circles and Gentlemen's Excuse Me, and I was like, who the heck is this? I love this. Absolutely hooked. He obviously chose the right songs. And that led to me going to my first Fish gig in Cheltenham, which is bizarrely kind of where I've ended up living. I wasn't living there at the time. So that was 97 on the Sunsets tour. So that was me coming into it. I've kind of done it all back to front because I'm much younger than some of you.
All right. All right.
Don't rub it in.
Again, this is why you've never been on before, you both. But
I
carry on.
won't be invited again. But yeah, so I did it all back to front. So I got into Fish solo, which led me into H Marillion, which led me into Fish Marillion. So kind of really back to front twisted. And my first Marillion gig was Cardiff on the Strange Engine tour. Couldn't
Cool.
tell you when that is. I'm sure one of you will know. Yeah, so that's how it all started and got me to where we are now, really.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Taff, what's your story?
I'm probably a bit more conventional, I guess, and this is going to make me sound like Methuselah in this company, but I started listening to Marillion in the mid-'80s, probably around when the hits happened, courtesy of my big sister playing me Misplaced Childhood. I nearly saw them at the Milton Keynes garden party, but went down with heat stroke. So my big sister had to take me home early from that one.
So you were there? You were there?
Yeah.
It was really hot that day.
It was incredibly stiflingly hot. best thing was I hadn't paid for a ticket. I'd won it, but that's another story. Um,
Well,
so
we've got an episode lined up about that gig, so we may get you back on for a short period of time to talk for 5 minutes about that gig.
I could tell you all about Gary Moore and Jethro Tull and
Yeah,
the other
yeah.
bands. So the post split was the first time I saw either of them, and I saw Marillion on Season's End tour at Aston Villa Leisure Centre. The only time in my life I've ever known of any band playing there, which I think was December '89. And then I saw Fish just after I'd started at Liverpool University in November of '91 on the Internal Exile tour.
Okay, cool. Very good. Well, as the listeners will find out, the three of you are on here because this the album that we're going to talk about today, Field of Crows, is, I think, to quote one of you, is the peak of your fandom. So when you were sort of most out and about and seeing gigs, but we'll come on to that shortly. So as I've just let the cat out of the bag, but you've seen from the title of the episode, we're going to discuss Field of Crows. And I'll just read a brief Wikipedia entry on this album. It's not correct, I'll tell you before I read it, but this is what it
Oh
says.
yeah, yeah.
Field of Crows is Fish's eighth solo studio album, his seventh of original material since he left Marillion in 1988, and the first since Fellini days in 2001. Released on Fish's own label, Chocolate Frog Records, retail distribution is now handled by Snapper Music.
It is.
No, indeed. Craig, this came out first time on the 10th of December 2003. How old were you when it came out?
I was the ripe old age of 32.
Oh, we're in the 30s now. Okay, cool.
Yes, in the 30s now. Not quite past it, not quite decrepit, not quite whatever.
Okay. We had a bit of a chat before we started recording, folks. As usual with a Fish album, there's quite a lot of a backstory from the big man's point of view. So we're going to touch on that a little bit here. Um, I don't even know where to start.
At the
It's
very beginning, but
Fish's revolving band members. In the year before, in 2002, he'd still got the basic lineup of the band with who was drumming for him in 2002. It's Johnny Martyr was drumming with him in 2002, and he kind of moved on, and more state of flux in the band. Stuart, you said you've got some sort of story about the keyboard players at this time. You're going to mention Irving Duguid.
Yeah, I mean, well, Irvin wrote, I think it's six of the songs
He did, yeah.
on the album, and funnily enough, Irvin is currently the MD for Hamilton in London,
Is
so
he?
he's
oh,
doing all
he's
right
done a
for
lot of
himself.
musicals, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did We Will Rock You, I think, as well. Um, but one of the things that sort of struck me as to some of the sounds of this is that not long before this, Fish and Irvin worked on the Frankie Miller tribute album,
Yeah.
which was done by Alec Downey, who was a big fan, and they did a cover of
Caledonia. Caledonia.
Caledonia, yeah, and it feels like that cover, the sort of build up and the way that the music is handled in that feels quite similar to Field of Crows. It was one of those things that I really thought when I was listening to Field of Crows for the first time in quite a while.
Especially the field.
Isn't Bruce Watson
Yes.
on Caledonia as well?
Yeah, I think
He
so.
might be. I mean,
think
I
he
think
is, yeah.
it was Brian. Did Brian Johnson play on it as well? I think there was quite. No, Taff's got the CD.
The remastered CD, which I think we'll come back to. It's so bloody small and it's so bloody dark in this room. I can't actually read any of it. But yeah, I'm pretty confident Bruce was on that tribute album.
But that would have been done the year before this, and it surprised me listening to it because it'd been a while since I'd listened to the album, but I had listened to some of the Frankie Miller album quite recently, and I was surprised at how much one sort of predated the other, but it felt like it was a natural reaction. And I know that Irvin was quite heavily involved in that album as well.
Yeah.
So, and I saw Irvin after that working with Ray Wilson because he worked with him I think, for quite a while as well. So, but I felt he was a really good influence on the writing, and it
Definitely.
was
I mean, it's a strange because there's Irving's influence in the album, but there's also Tony Terrell's all over the album, and then has a writing credit on the Lost Plot as well. So you've got, despite everything we're going to say, there's a lot of keyboards, but there's a lot of guitars on the album as well.
Oh yes.
It's a
Oh yes.
much more live sounding record than what preceded it, I would say.
I'm like a bit like Stuart. I hadn't listened to this CD in yonks, and then I put it on last weekend because you'd asked me to do this. And I thought, oh, I better have a bit of a listen to that. And actually, I've been playing it ever since because I enjoyed it so much. But as soon as I put it on, what struck me was there's guitars all over it.
Yeah.
You know, you've got Bruce playing and you got Frank playing, and both raising each other up to the top of their game, really. And if you compare it with some of the later Fish albums, right up to Weltschmerz, there's a lot more guitars on this one than you'll hear in the more recent stuff. And I really like it for that.
Yeah.
it reminded me.
Sorry, go on,
Sorry, I was
Stuart.
just gonna say it reminded me how much I miss Frank on some of the more recent stuff because he was just so distinctive, and you knew the minute Frank picked up a guitar what you were going to get and that it was going to be good.
I think Mark Brzezicki as well. So the remix brings out his performance more. I think there's a more sort of space in the sound and more of an ambient sound as well. But it's much the same as yourselves. Craig and I were actually dreading reviewing this because our memory of it is really poor. And that's partly why we got you three on, because we know you like the album. But
And I'll tell you what, that remix is a different world.
yeah,
One of the, even right back when it was brand new, one of my biggest criticisms of it was really poorly produced, and it didn't do the songs justice just in the way they came over sonically on a CD without trying to sound too grand about it. It just didn't sound like the band sounds live. It didn't sound like any incarnation of the band sound in the studio either, from what I could tell.
no.
And production wise and sort of sonic quality wise, it was a little bit disappointing. But this remix that's been released a few years ago now, which I think was largely done by Chris Kimsey, wasn't it? From some very basic materials. They didn't have the full multi-track to work from. It's a different world, and it sounds so much better. So if anybody hasn't delved into the remix of this, they're missing out. It's a real treat.
See, this is where
get it before it's deleted. Craig hasn't got it either.
I mean, this is where I hold my hand up for me at the time. This was head and shoulders, standing on stilts, my least favorite Fish album by more than a country mile. I feckin' hated it with a passion, and we all nicknamed it "Yield of Lows."
No,
Right.
you nicknamed it Yield.
Not just me,
I'm having
Dobby,
nothing to do with that.
the whole lot. And I'll stick my hands up now and say that I was wrong.
I
Especially
know someone else who
especially with
nicknamed it
remix.
Field of Cows.
Oh, I was going to talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, and people
had
who
a
call it
t-shirt
field,
printed with a cow on the sleeve instead of fish on the sleeve.
and some people still call it Field of Crap. But I'll hold my hands up. I'll hold my hands up listening to this week because I didn't buy the remix. And I even said to John, do I have to do this album? And I've took a step back and I've listened to it. I've probably listened to it more in this last 2 weeks than I have in the last 20 years. And I've really been the remix of it just brings it alive, and I've really, really enjoyed it. So this is where I'll put my hands up and say I was wrong.
It was never my least favourite album. Hey, did you notice that? I got a word in edgeways instead
I get
of
a
them.
word in. This is unheard of.
That must be a first. It was never my least favourite album. That was one of. Do you want me to fess up about which?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, you can fess up.
My least favourite Fish solo album is Suits.
Get off. See ya.
Because I think it's got some really good material on it. It's got some good songs on it, but I think they've been absolutely played to death on various cheap tour dates.
Well,
in
you know how
advance.
you feel about this tour that we're going to talk about. That's how me and him feel about the Suits era.
Yeah. Isn't it great that we all have the same music and disagree on fundamental
Yeah,
things?
yeah. But it's
But
good
yeah,
that,
my least favorite Suits. But again, it's production and just the way it turned out, the way it gets in your ears.
yeah. I'll
So
give you
that
no dummy, but the rest of it, Emma,
Yeah,
what
but
do you think? What do you think of Field?
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is I think at the time it was a very much a Marmite thing. So there were lovers, there were haters. And actually, my memory is so bad that I'm so grateful that I wrote two articles for the Fish fanzine about one about the album and one about the tour. Otherwise, there's no point me being here. I can't remember much.
Hey.
But the article about the album that I wrote said that people weren't sure about it. But then some people, I've got a quote here that someone said that they weren't sure that Fellini Days really worked, but suddenly now he's written this Field of Crows, he's back on track. So the contrast was phenomenal between how people were taking this album. And what's really interesting, exactly the same as you guys have said, I put it on and I was just instantly transported back. And for me, the music is about as much of the memories of the tour and the people as much as it is the music. And sometimes it's hard for me to detach that. So I can say, oh, I love this song because we did this, not necessarily because the song is a good song. So I struggle with that a little bit.
But that's
Yeah,
good.
I've
Just
listened to it.
throw those stories in. That's great.
I've listened to it today when I was supposed to be working. Sorry, when I was working really hard.
yeah, we're working on. Yeah,
When I was working really hard, and I scribbled a few notes, and then when I got home, I found the review that I'd done for the Fish fanzine of the CD, and weirdly, I kept using the same words for the songs. So
Okay.
even though, however, 20 odd years down the line, you kind of think you're going to have a different view. Actually, the feelings I had about a lot of the songs and the bits that stuck out are actually largely still the same, which proves I was right in the first place.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, but
Okay.
on the road to the album coming out, because there was that small tour in like Edinburgh, Trinent, and Haddington, and that in the
That was the
summer
year
beforehand. It was
before, yeah.
2000. That was 2003, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Forgotten that.
Yeah, and that was that. I'll never forget the night of the Fish gig in Edinburgh, because that was the first time I had bloody kidney stones, and that's the first time it actually set off. And those 3 dates weren't exactly great because I was feeling absolutely awful.
Oh, bless
Good
you.
gig. It was a good gig though before it,
It was a
wasn't
good
it?
gig though, yeah, really good gig.
Was Trinent the one where it's in like a village hall?
Yeah.
School.
And
Yeah.
we were
It
doing
was a school gym.
oh, that's right. And
Yeah,
people
it was like a Jim Hawkins, wasn't it?
sneaking in sort of drinks with vodka in them because the drinks weren't very good. And I can remember doing Internal Exile because we had loads of space. It was the most surreal venue.
It
And it was
was
very,
The
very light,
Edinburgh
wasn't
one,
it? It was.
the Lock Centre apparently.
the Edinburgh
It
one
was.
was in for some club. I can't for the
It
life of
was
me.
it was in the Arches. It was in
No, it was the venue.
the venue.
Anyway,
I've
it was
got-
early. It was an early show in Scotland in midsummer, and I remember coming out to
was
the gig
boiling
at
hot.
10:30 or whatever it was, and it was broad daylight.
Oh yeah, that was
That's
weird.
wrong.
Anyhow, we've jumped
Right.
ahead to the tour. Let's come
Well,
back to the
we've done
album.
we've done the pre-tour.
Yeah, we've done the
That was a
pre-tour.
pre-tour.
I did
The pre-tour.
5 dates on the pre-tour. I looked it up. So
Okay.
I did the Glasgow Cat House in February.
Yeah.
We did that. We did that.
Yeah.
We did
Yeah,
the,
we did,
did
yeah.
that. Yeah.
I did Big in Falkirk, where Fish shared the stage with the Cheeky Girls.
No, we didn't do that.
What?
Yeah, they were on after him, I think, or before him. But
Oh, brilliant.
He was supporting
Yeah,
the cheeky girls. That's all I need to say.
I did Dundee's Cotton Club.
Yeah.
Where I went with Joe's guitarist at the time, and then the venue in Edinburgh, which was the 30th of May, and then the final gig was the Loch Centre at Trinent. And I think that for those last 2 dates, I stayed in a tent in Fish's Garden.
Wow. Was Joe doing support for those gigs? Or when
He did the venue and the Loch Centre.
Okay.
But I vividly remember the Cat House gig in Glasgow because that was just across the road from the KFC on the corner and upstairs, and I remember getting searched for knives and all the rest of it on the way in because I think it had a reputation of being a bit rough as a badger's arse,
Bit stabby.
a bit stabby.
Were they making sure you had one?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
They were giving them
Have one.
to you as you go in. I remember that one as well because I remember it being quite unusual in that the band just all sort of hung around and we all sat in the cat house in like one of the booths and just sort of chilled for a while. And that was quite unusual at the time. And the cat house was a very small venue.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
Yeah. Shall we talk about the music on the record?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a
Can I ask a
why
question
not?
first, please?
Oh,
Yeah.
go for it,
Lovely,
Mug.
lovely gentleman. In this article, it says that we were expecting this to be a concept album.
Yes,
Was it a
it wasn't
concept
big.
album or not?
It was
No.
originally going to be a concept album about a character called Crow,
That rings a bell.
who, if you, in this that Taff was waving around in the deluxe, he talks about it. There was, I can't remember what, there was a shooting
Shooting in America,
in
yeah.
America around the time of him writing the album,
It was
and
the
the concept
Beltway
was going to be
shooting,
about
wasn't
rallying against, the government and everything, all of that sort of thing. So he then dropped the concept, but that's why you've got, as we're going to come on to, I'm sure, tracks like The Field, which was one of the ones that was going to be in the concept, and then
Okay.
others that don't relate at all.
That makes sense. I mean, there's definitely themes coming through. I know that's
Yeah.
very clear, but I can remember at the time thinking, this isn't how I understand a concept album, but it's all coming back to me now.
I think
Although,
it does actually state in the book which ones were in there, but I can't quote them off the top of my head.
I think it's one
Offhand,
of
I think it's moving. I think it's the field, moving targets, rookie and numbers. Offhand,
it's one of his great lost movie scripts, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of them to choose from, to be fair. But I think when you commented on Facebook about this, I think Darren Moore had said that he felt it was a concept piece.
He did, yeah.
oh, I missed
Start
that.
to finish.
Okay.
And he enjoyed it more because of that, he said. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But anyhow, The Field, the first track.
It's
I
I wasn't a great fan of the original mix of it because I thought it was building up to go somewhere where it never actually went. But I think, similar to The Sky Above the Rain, the original version on Sounds That Can't Be Made, I'm not a big fan of, but the version that's on Friends from the Orchestra, I really like. And with The Field, it's similar. I really like the new mix of it. Could do with a little bit of orchestra in. It would make it perfect, but I think it's a nice track.
I love it.
Emma, I did need to point out Emma, dead inside. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't. Yeah, I mean, I always just found it a little bit slow. I mean, I do love it. There's something about the pace which interests me. I can't put my finger on it.
It feels to me like a final track on an album.
Yeah.
Kind of tail. It. I think Craig said the other day when we were talking about it, it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
It's nearly 9 minutes long, and I
Is
mean,
it
there's
9 minutes
yeah,
long?
there's
Wow.
there's a really nice sort of refrain at the end. We'll take the field, which is presumably links back to the concept and introducing the concept as it was originally.
It doesn't have a big crescendo before it does that end bit,
No.
and but the version on the remix is better than the original one, and it does build up better on the remix than the original one does.
I think the pace of it feels a little bit like a march at the end,
Yes.
a slow march.
Yeah.
And like Taff and I, as soon as he started saying it, was swaying our head. Yeah, it's just there's something about the pace which is interesting. That's all I could say really, other than picking out anything specific about that. But
It's not a really strong opening, is it? Really?
I think
interesting.
I think this is the one where it did feel like the moving on from the Frankie Miller album, because it does build quite, it does have that almost slightly epic build to it. But the other thing I noticed when I listened to it is that it's kind of the first time that I really feel Fisher's changing the sort of pitch of the song to match his voice, as opposed to trying
Yeah.
to pretend that he can sing the way he used to. And I think that's really noticeable on the album as a whole. I think it's a real benefit to it. I think I love the songs on Fellini Days, but I think some of the production and some of the the vocals and stuff really let it down. Whereas I think live they
Yes,
were
yeah.
phenomenal. A bit like Suits, what you're talking about, Suits. I find it quite a disappointing album, but because it was so incredible live, it never translated the live versions into the album, and I think that's what disappoints me. My least favorite Fish album is very controversially for most Fish fans, Sunsets on Empire, which I just to this day do not like.
Get
I,
it.
I can I can
I
see
will
that. Yeah, I can see
I
that.
will always state that, in my view, Marillion's last incredibly good album was the same year as Fish's last incredibly bad album for me. And I've pretty much said that to Fish. He didn't look very impressed, but
Yeah.
I just don't get it. I just don't get Sunsets. There's very few songs. I would be happy. There's not a single song on this album that I wouldn't rather hear than any song on Sunsets.
Okay.
I suppose I should be controversial about my least favorite Fish album, but we'll
Well,
leave that for.
I'm not telling you what mine is because we will review it at some point. So that's to come. We've not
Not one
reviewed
you've
it
done
yet.
yet, then.
We've not
Yeah,
done it
but
yet.
no, we're not done it yet. But my least favorite is Feast of Consequences. So there you go.
Can I make an even worse confession?
Yeah.
Come on then. Where we're
I
doing
don't-
it.
That I don't think of Fish's songs as in albums. So because I've been to so many live gigs, I just know the songs. And sometimes I can't even really remember what album they're from. But I don't ever listen to albums. I mean, I don't listen to a massive amount of music, tragically, at the moment. But I listen to songs, not albums. And I think that's probably a good confession to make.
That's even weirder than Stuart saying he doesn't like Sunset on Empire.
I like to be weird, you know that. I like to be different.
That's the thing that doing this has kind of brought to us because I think I said it in an episode that's gone out today. Prior to doing this, if I pulled any Marillion or Fish out the rack, it would be live. I wouldn't really pick a studio album.
I'm
But going
completely
back,
opposite. Yeah,
going back and listening to, I mean, this is the first time I've pulled Feel the Crows out the rack since it came out, I'm sure. But anyway, that anything else to say on the field?
Well, I like it.
Good.
I always thought it was a good opener and it would be a good live opener, and I thought it was. So I like its kind of its build from its quiet little picked out guitar opening, and then you get lots of guitars. Yeah.
And you went a bit of sax in this as well.
Yeah, you get that
there's
kind
a bit
of
bass in it. Yeah.
you get that kind of Celtic feel, which is probably Bruce, sticking his oar in. And I really like it. And I think it sets the tone for the rest of the album. So I like it. Yeah.
No, I agree.
Did he open that at Coco in London or not?
He's never didn't play it on the tour.
Didn't he?
Nope. It's not on the tour.
Okay. I just couldn't remember. I couldn't remember what he opened with, whether it was the Rookie or
He opened with the Rookie in Coco.
in London. Okay.
Can you guys remember then? Obviously, some people were more disappointed than others. Can you remember what you thought when you first heard it? Was it one of those things of, oh, this is Fish, or did you think this is a bit different?
I think it's too. For me, it's too. At the time, it was too straight ahead rock, and I wasn't really oversold on the sleeve or any of the concept or anything at all. It's all a bit strange at the time. I mean, since I've learned to love it, but
no, see that's why I like it. And when I flicked through the review I'd written in the fanzine all those years ago, one of the things I said towards the end of it was, it sounds like a Fish album. It doesn't sound like a Fish and Steve Wilson album that we'd had previously. It doesn't sound like a Fish and John Wesley album that we'd had previously. It sounds like Fish with his pretty much regular band off and on, most of them, the core of guys who played with him for a long time. Yeah. And it sounds like Fish, which is, probably why I quite liked it then. And, having revisited now, I quite like it again.
I like it far more today than I did when it came out.
Yeah.
And again, going back to my review, it's interesting when I just wrote a paragraph about what people thought about it, and there were hints of this is too middle of the road mainstream.
Yeah.
So if you were a Fish fan coming from a real prog background, I'm suggesting, and I could be wrong, that actually this album was just too far towards middle of the road for them at the time, and perhaps just as time has changed, perhaps that people have got more used to that sort of thing. I don't know. I find it interesting that you guys hated it at the time and now really love it. I mean, that's a real change around, but we're talking 20 years. I was
But it's only in the last week that I've formed
okay.
that view because I wouldn't pull it out.
No, well, that's awesome. I think, and that's why this podcast, for many other reasons, is so awesome that we're looking at things in a completely different eye. We're completely different people 20 years on.
Yeah.
So many experiences in that time. In fact, half my life almost, not really. Um, but yeah, working out that the first gig of this tour we went to was the 14th of February, and I was like, that's almost exactly 20 years ago. That's just fascinating in itself, trying to bring back these memories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 22 years ago.
Oh, was it?
I
Yeah, 2003 was the February
2003,
thing,
yeah.
and then into 2004.
Okay.
interestingly, I heard a song from this, which I'll mention how I heard it later, ahead of the rest of the album. So I went into it with quite a skewed idea of what the album was going to sound like, and I'm really pleased it didn't sound like what I thought it was going to sound like. And I'll explain why
Yeah.
Okay.
as we move
So
through the album.
so next up is Moving
Go on to moving
Targets.
targets. Yeah.
This was one of the ones that I didn't care for that much initially. But again, it's really grown on us. Really grown on us.
Yeah, I didn't write about it. I only wrote about the songs which I felt I had something to write about. So I don't think it was one of my favourites. Is it one? Is it the one where the time signature changes in the middle of it? I'm
Oh
trying to
yeah,
picture the
probably.
song.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a quiz. I'm sorry.
I was worried about you asking me questions, wasn't I?
No, you ask away. This is where the album starts for me. It's got a really live feel about it, this track.
And it's got very clever fish wordplay, hasn't it?
Yeah,
With
yeah.
it's hominins and the bit that always sticks out when I hear it is when the character exits a subway and picks up a magazine.
Yeah.
And I never know if he means a magazine to read or a magazine to put in his gun.
Clever that, isn't it?
And that kind of ambiguity,
Good,
I think, is so clever.
Yeah,
It's really clever, isn't it? To leave that doubt in your mind still after hearing it 1,000 times all these years later, and that's one of the sort of characteristic fish things that I really enjoy.
Yeah, so much double meaning in the song. Yeah. Yeah.
This is the first one that Irving's got a writing credit on as well. So it's Bruce, Watson, Fish, and Irving.
A song that reminds me, as much as I love Fish's lineup, I really miss Frank Usher because this is a song which felt like it had him all over it. And again, because I guess he'd been a part of Fish's lineup at this point since day one. He was the only consistent member of Fish's band.
Yeah, he was back then.
Yeah.
And it just, this album with the big guitar theme that we've spoken about just feels like he's really present on it, and it would be quite easy for another guitarist to be sort of overshadowed by Bruce Watson, especially because Bruce Watson does almost a similar thing to Frank, and they've got quite distinctive guitar sounds, and yet I don't think he gets lost at all. I think it's really obvious where you're hearing him.
Yeah, it's a very different approach to Robin, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Robin's generally a lot more subtle.
Yes.
Although
it's the big country sledgehammer approach, isn't it?
It is, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Robin's the most similar to Steve Rothery they kind of come from a similar sort of background, and I always think Robin's quite underrated. I remember relatively recently someone going on about how he was a terrible guitarist compared to Steve Rothery, and I was thinking he's the only guitarist to have ever deputized for Steve Rothery, is he not? So that doesn't happen for no reason, and Pete doesn't play with rubbish musicians. That's not something he does.
And tell you what, he was outstanding when I saw him in Germany tail end of last year. He was really showing off. I thought he was great
In a good way.
Oh yeah.
Moving Targets rolls straight into the Rookie.
The hooks that on this song are great, and it's one of my favorite songs on the album. It's a rocker, and I love the keyboards. It's
Yeah, some
just
Hammond on it,
yeah,
isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, lovely
yeah,
big
yeah,
Hammond whirly
Yeah.
sound, isn't it?
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Tony Terrell does an absolute cracking job on this. Like, hats off to him. Good lad.
He seldom fails to do a cracking job, to be fair.
Oh, dude, he's all over this album. I mean, he's absolutely brilliant on this album.
I think that's why I liked it so much. And again, looking back at my feedback, it was the songs I picked out as my favourites. I then found out were the ones he co-wrote, and my favourite all time is Plague of Ghosts.
Yeah.
So obviously, I just am in tune with what Tony writes, and being a pianist, I use that word very, very,
Carefully.
very carefully because I really am not. The piano's there just to look good, but I think that I connect with that part of this album, and I do find that I've used the word about flowing melodies that he plays on the piano and on the keyboards, and that's for me what's really sort of got me loving this album, I think.
Yeah.
I
What
think
do you
one of
make
the
of
things.
the Fish is chanting on this track, isn't he?
Oh, that's the only thing that annoys us, the Native American-y kind of
Yeah.
stuff that he does sometimes. That's
I
it,
I
it
had it
doesn't
on
put
at the
doesn't put us
weekend.
off it.
I had it on at the weekend, and Leslie said, "Is he all right?"
He's having a fit.
We
Yeah,
won't. Don't tell us what the answer was.
he got in a bit of trouble for that, didn't he? He was
Did he?
yeah, he played it on one of his Fish on Fridays, and
And he had his headgear on, didn't he? Yes,
yeah, put
yes.
on a headdress and danced around the farm.
Oh, I remember that. No,
A
yeah.
couple of people took objection to it and
Did
said he
did
was
some
culturally
newspaper not pick up on it?
misappropriating.
It was in the press
I
briefly.
Yeah, I think so. Do you know what? Have I find this quite a forgettable track. Um, it sort of blends into. There's a couple of tracks on this, and I love the album as a whole. I like them all individually when I hear them, but there's a couple of tracks here that feel almost like they could blend into one another. They all sound quite similar to me, but that's possibly just me. I think that happens quite a lot for me in some of these things.
I had to
Um,
check what the track was called because obviously it's not. He doesn't mention it in lyrics, and
No, it's different.
You
Yeah.
say it's forgettable. I genuinely am sitting here quiet because I can't remember what
oh,
it
it's
is.
brilliant.
I
Oh,
Sorry.
win.
you'll know it when
You'd
you
know
hear
it, yeah,
it.
you'd
Of
know
course
it.
I will. I know them all. It's just, and again, like you say, the title doesn't help really.
Big man with big plans.
Oh, right,
And big
okay.
ideas.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
Again, though, it's pitched to his vocal. Again, it's
Yes.
one of those ones, and I do think, as I said before, I think this is all over this album, and he just feels like he's got that bit right, and it's not something he's even got right every time since then.
no,
I
but you
think,
can
but
focus on just listening to it then, because you're not thinking, "Oh my God, he's stretching himself again,"
yeah,
or yeah, it's good. I think the rookie's cracking.
And I think it was a good opener for a set. It
Yeah,
really kind of, it just opens with a good kick.
on to Zoo Class.
Now, isn't this all about him? This is me trying to think now about him not like being squashed on a plane, or have I made that up completely?
nope, that's completely right.
Yay, I do know something.
It's
Not much.
it's probably the weakest song on the album for me,
Yeah,
and it
same
is
here.
the song that I heard first. So back in November 2003, so a month before it came out, Fish weirdly found himself in Aberdeen, having been invited to do Children in Need.
Oh,
So he was part of the presenting team for Children in Need in Aberdeen. So he invited me and the person I was going out with at the time down to the studios. And it sort of ended up with us having a night out with variable people in his hotel, going back to his hotel afterwards. And at the end of the night, quite drunk, Fish is like, "Come up to my room," which is not as dodgy as it sounds. He goes, "And I'll play you. I've got one of the tracks from the album. I'll play it." And it was Zoo Class, and it was one of those things where I was like, "God, I hope the album's not going to sound like it." It didn't. I don't remember thinking it was the worst thing I'd ever heard, but I was like, "God, I really hope the album is not this."
I rather assume you probably didn't tell him that at the time.
No, I think to be fair, I think I would. I'm not that known for being diplomatic, but I don't think I was outright bad about it. But I think I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting new style." I think is possibly the sort of language, the sort of thing I said. But I just remember thinking, "Oh, this is not what I expected." And then, so when the album started, I was just like, oh, thank God. It's not all this kind of weird, sort of pun-laden
Mm.
thing.
I quite like the puns, and I've written kind of jazz and funk. I don't know if that's at all correct, but there's something about it being finger clicking. Does that make
I've
any
I've
sense?
I've put the word swagger. It's
Yeah,
got
yeah,
swagger
yeah.
to it.
That might be a better word. Yeah, it was good live. Did we? Well, I'm saying it's good live. Did we have it
Yeah,
live?
yeah, yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I mean,
it was
there's
good
a
live to
yeah,
dance.
there's a lot of brass on the studio version, though, isn't there?
There
So
is, yeah.
yeah.
Which is
Taff.
quite unusual, isn't it? I've written that down as
Yeah,
well, that brass and saxophone, you don't
yeah.
hear that very much in Fish albums, so that stood out.
Yeah, I've just written it walks a fine line. I'm not sure whether it's
Sorry,
absolutely.
you've written it for this track and not one that's coming up.
I've got similar thoughts on one that's coming up,
Okay,
but
yeah.
yeah, I'm not quite sure whether it's genius or
Or
whether
bollocks.
it's
It is a bollocks.
or whether it's something that Fish referred to himself in talking about one of his other songs as sixth form poetry.
I don't.
The way you cram all the animal puns in there. I mean, I have a reputation for having a head full of cracker jokes, but yeah, I'd be proud of some of those. They're doozers, but yeah, I still can't decide about Zooclass. I really, even after all this time, I can't tell if it's
It's
genius or
fun.
madness.
I
I put
really
it down
enjoy
as
it. I
fun.
really enjoy it.
Yeah,
Bother me. Better than what's
Yeah,
coming up.
I'm not a great fan. It's all right, but
I'm all up for
I
puns.
think
Nonsense.
it either is genius or terrible. It probably depends on your mood, how much you've had to drink, and where you're hearing it.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Look, I know the three of you have not been on the podcast before, but the terms on this podcast are it's either genius or it's bollocks.
Sorry, we're sit on the fences.
No, you can't. You can't.
That's
There is
my
no.
life.
There's no fence.
Surely it can be both at the same time or
No.
in different times.
I think
you
you've
can't.
I
Yeah,
think
you
Stuart,
can't
are
play
You
you?
should
Are
Stuart.
say
you
this was bollocks and now you like it. I mean,
at
come
the
on. I
risk
mean,
of upsetting our American listeners, are you American, Stuart?
I was going to say you can't play Schrodinger's genius or bollocks.
No, no.
I like the way Stuart summed it up about it's where you listen to it, who you're listening to, what mood you're in. Sometimes you can completely enjoy something you never thought you could after a few drinks or with the right people. So I think that's really interesting.
Well, I'm just going to send for another glass of wine,
You don't
and
have a bell.
Hint, hint.
and maybe by the end of the show, I'll have made a decision. Thank you, darling.
Any chance you could pop over to Churchdown as well, or is it just in-house?
No,
Okay, just didn't do
I'm going to move on to the next track, which
very good
is
idea.
the Tony Terrell co-write "The Lost Plot."
Ah,
Yeah.
I
And you
like
can
this
hear it.
song.
You can hear it instantly that Tony Terrell co-wrote
Yeah.
this. There's two songs on the album that
Yeah.
he co-wrote, and then both of them. I listened to this album for the first time in a long time, and it was maybe probably similarly for my partner who does not like this album particularly much, and she was just like, as soon as it came on, she's like, I forgot Tony was on this without me having said anything about it, just because it couldn't be anybody else.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like the arpeggio kind of keyboards, and I think the piano is classy on it, and I like the song.
I
yeah,
love it, absolutely love it. And it was that whole thing of, the notes going up and down,
Yeah.
like you said, and you could always picture the snakes and ladders board. And
Yeah.
I kind of could relate, I don't know if this is correct or not, but to the whole thing of throwing a dice, and sometimes that can dictate the journey of your life up and down. Is that what it's meant to mean? That's what it meant to
I
me.
think this song is basically about the end of his relationship with the wife.
Oh, is it not? Is it not the one he talks about in the book where
He
he'd
played
agreed
it to
with his
her.
wife that they was going to split on the same day that his girlfriend finished with him?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the gist of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's just about the strain and cracking up under the pressures of life, and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in terms of whether it's genius or bollocks, it is definitely not
Genius.
bollocks.
Yeah.
When I didn't hear. What
Sorry,
did you say?
it's definitely not genius.
I said it's
Definitely
definitely
not
not bollocks.
Oh, I thought you said
No.
not genius.
I thought you said the opposite. Did Craig say the opposite?
Craig
No,
did,
I love
yeah.
it. I think it's great.
Okay, awesome.
I like it. I don't like it as much as you guys, but I like it. It's just a change of pace, I think. And Tony just oozes class on it, I have to
Yeah,
say.
for me, it's the piano, and again, me saying to you, is that what it's meant to mean? Actually, the whole point of music and songs is that you can interpret them
What it
in the
means
way
to
it's
you.
meaningful to you, and in that moment,
Absolutely.
that's important. So for me, it was all about the ups and downs of life and throwing the dice, and one decision can mean that life can change direction, and that just alone in the music. I'm much more into the music. When I first listen to an album, I hear the music rather than the words. And that's what sticks with me. So for me, this is an awesome song. It was my favorite on the album.
Do you know
One of my favorites
the only thing,
overall.
the only disappointing thing about it for me? All right, here's one for you train spotters there. The only disappointing thing about it for me is it fades, which is very unusual for a Fish song.
I've got that on my. That's literally what I was just about to say.
And me, yeah.
Not a big fan of the fade. I've got written on my notes
Yeah.
for it, and it. I think you're right. I think because it's not a normal thing. It's not like it's calling all stations where every single
song
track
fades, yeah.
fades out. It's really unusual, and therefore it's just like, did you not know how to end it? Was this what
Yeah.
happened? You just were like, shit, we'll just keep going and then fade it down.
And if you want to be really silly, in my interpretation, it could be seen as actually it's never ending. This kind of roller coaster of life is never ending.
Oh,
Oh, Taff just pulled a little face there, like I've said something interesting for once.
And I put a
But
little
again,
spot.
that's personal interpretation, and yeah, I'm not a fan of it. But actually, to throw it in very occasionally is not a bad thing because it's got us thinking and got us talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing what you're saying with it with this album, it is a total Tony Terrell fan fest. Yeah,
Yeah.
and a bit of a spoiler is he is coming on the podcast. So
Yay!
we've got him coming on soon. So listen out.
I'll listen to
Anyway,
that one.
I'm gonna end all this jollity and just say to you 2 words: Old Crow.
Yeah.
Oh, good luck with this.
Hopping. Yeah, one thing I'd say about the lyrically, because all I think about the lyrics at the beginning of this is it just turns into Heidi High for me.
Hody ho!
It is. It's just so much bloody Heidi High, hody ho, go to the holiday rock.
I don't get the hate as much for it. Although, I didn't know who I was going to be on the podcast with ahead of turning up here. And what was really interesting is that in my notes here, I have literally written, I seem to also remember members of the amazing Company Gloster having a specific Old Crow dance, and I think that's partially why I like it.
Well, I don't remember that. I mean, we
I
laughed a
seem to
lot.
think that was a thing.
If it's not on
Blocked
video,
it
it
out.
didn't happen.
You seem to be distancing yourself from it already.
Well, what is interesting is that there's no doubt that most people just went, "What?" when they heard
Exactly.
it. Okay. Most people say they hate it. Now, live, I loved it. I think that's probably what Stuart's talking about. We go to these gigs because we want to have fun. It's an escape from real life, and it was a bit of nonsense. He was having fun on stage, which always fuels me. And we just had a dance, and that's all very nice. But as a Fish album and listening to the album, it literally was, what the heck is going on here? I don't understand it. Again, in the review, I put, for someone who's so amazing with words, what is going on at the beginning of this song? A hop, hoppity, hippity. I don't even remember. Hop, hop, hopping. I can remember I tried to write it out for the review, and it was so difficult. It just looked like nonsense. Is he just having fun? He's allowed
Yeah.
to
He's
have
yeah.
just
fun.
having
Yeah.
fun with it. I mean,
I
to be
think
fair,
that's what it is. It's a bit throwaway. It's apparently about a drunk dancing and not caring about the rest of the world, according to the notes in the remaster.
Awesome.
And I think it's just rejoicing in a bit of eccentricity. I don't feel the hate.
I don't feel the hate on it now. No.
Yeah.
Would you say though? I mean, he did it. They did issue a 4-track radio edits EP, and this was the lead track on it.
It's a strange choice.
Straight, yeah, understatement that, isn't it? Really, but yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
Okay.
is it this album's hope for the future? Is that?
Well, Craig loves that now.
I would take Old Crow over No Dummy Offsuits any day.
Yes, I'll give you that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I have to admit, Old Crow, although it was fun at the time, I skip it in the car when it comes on random.
I have
Might
written
be
down
all
in my
right.
notes. I would take it over anything on Sunsets on Empire. So
Oh, Stuart, man.
Yeah, but that's your catchphrase on this episode,
Yes,
now, isn't it?
absolutely.
All right, moving on. Numbers.
Now, I reckon this is the one where you're going to say you're not quite sure if it's genius or stupid.
Who?
You.
I love numbers.
I love it.
I've got really vivid memories of it in the Edinburgh gig.
Yeah.
On that really hot gig that you were talking about. It's the standout track from that gig for me.
Wow.
The only problem I've ever had with it, and I still have it to this day, is the lyrics are great, but how do you make 3 calls to different numbers in 4 cities?
3 calls to 4 numbers.
The different numbers in 4 cities.
You can't.
What's
Well,
that?
that's 12 calls in total, isn't it?
Well,
Three.
3 numbers to different. So 3 calls to different numbers in 4 cities.
Well, I'm glad you've pointed it out and therefore wrecked the song forevermore.
Yeah,
I know it.
my work is done then.
Tonight,
Yeah.
but thanks,
You
man.
can have a
Never
group
thought
call on
about it.
WhatsApp. You group call on WhatsApp, so
WhatsApp didn't exist when this came out.
It was
He was just thinking
prophetic.
ahead.
It was prophetic.
Can I read out a bit that I wrote about the intro
Yeah.
to this
Yeah.
Go for it.
and see what you make of it? So I put, to create this pre-intro, follow my recipe. Take a hint of the introduction to Yes's Owner of a Lonely Heart. Add the sound of someone humming. Then take the ring collecting sound from the computer game Sonic the Hedgehog and finish off by using the spoken words in a very low voice. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it is a random intro. I mean, how
Yeah,
else,
it's good,
how
though.
else can you
Good.
describe it? Obviously.
Good.
I think it's very clever. I think it's quite menacing, and it's another one that just builds and builds, and you've got the big heavy drums at the end and guitars and rock music. It's good. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's great.
I love the whole numbers, all the way he's played with numbers. So you've got obviously multiply, subtract, divide, adding to our problems in our calculating mind. I think it's very fish. It's very clever.
Yeah.
And I can remember again writing that it wasn't that long after 9/11. I may be wrong about this, but he says,
It wasn't written very long after.
yeah. So he says
about 9/11 becomes 24/7.
Yeah, 9/11 became 24/7. The countdown had begun, and then obviously mentions ground zero. So I just love that whole connection that he's playing around with words, but yet it's still so meaningful.
Yeah.
So it's zoo class for math geeks. Is that what you're saying?
I'm glad there's no actual maths in it.
Anything else on numbers? Oh, sorry, it's a Frank Usher co-write.
Yeah.
There aren't many of them.
No, there aren't.
No, I didn't realise that. And that would be why it's heavy on the guitars then, Taff.
Yeah. On to Exit Wound.
Yeah, this is a weird one, isn't it?
Mm.
It is, yeah.
I love it.
That's
I
jazz,
think
that is. That's jazz.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's
Nice, yeah.
quite jazzy. I like the pace on it. Again, it's cracking song.
I
I just
was-
put it's unusual to hear a saxophone, which I mentioned earlier, but it's very obvious here, isn't it? That's something unusual for Fish. It's a very different
I
sound.
think in its own way, it's probably as unusual as Old Crow. And it gives a lot of dynamic to the record that, you've got the obligatory ballad and you've got,
I mean, it's the
slowest
song on the
rockers
album. Yeah,
with
it's a slow
big
song on the album.
guitars. And you play this in the middle of it and you go, oh, hang on, that's a bit different, isn't it? It puts a lot of depth into the styles and adds something into the mix of what you've got on the different tracks. And yeah, I quite like it. It makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It's the weakest song on the album for me. It just meanders. It doesn't really go anywhere. It does change the pace, and you need that contrast, but it more so than the Field, it just doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I get what you mean with that. I don't dislike it, but a bit more bland, perhaps.
Yeah. When you think I mean, that's probably not helped by what's around it as well on the album, because I do like the tracks that are around it.
But
But
Fish
it does
likes
fit
his light. He likes his light and shade, and he likes his different.
Yeah.
It fits. It fits well on the album, and I like it.
Do you think? Because I think it doesn't fit the concept to me. I know it's got a name that fits the kind of assassin, no G concept.
Was it one of the ones that were originally going to be in the? I don't know.
I don't
I
think
would guess not, because the thing that surprised me most about it is when I heard it and it's quite orchestrated, I sort of assumed Irvin was involved in the writing of it, and
He's
he wasn't.
not. No, he's
It was
not.
a Watson and Fish only, and that
Yeah.
surprised me, which makes me think it maybe isn't one of the original ones if Irvin wasn't
Yeah.
involved in it.
Yeah, probably true. Yeah.
See, I would have thought that would be more of like, like Tony Terrell's influence would have been more not really guitar based like the rest of them, and it's not like a straightforward rocker or anything like that, but shows the diversity.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Track 9 is Innocent Party.
Yeah.
I call this the angry track. He likes to have a good angry a track where he can spit the words out and all over us.
Yeah, I like this one. This is a proper rock and roll song, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, but I was saying to John the other day, it to me it keeps feeling like it's going into View from a Hill. You
Interesting.
can you can hear it in the kind of chorus bits where it's just mirroring View from a Hill sonically and musically.
Well, that's
I
interesting because I remember listening to it the first time and thinking immediately, this sounds like Pipeline. And I haven't gone back to revisit that, but apparently it might even be in the same key. So there's all those hints of other stuff he's done coming into this.
I think
to
it's
me,
the sequencer that probably reminds you of Pipeline, is it?
It was the intro. Again, this is what
Yeah.
I wrote 20 years
Yeah.
ago. But I do remember that was before I was reviewing it. That was the first thing I connected it with. So it'd be interesting to revisit that really and see if there's anything in that or not, or whether it's
I think one of the traits that I really enjoy in Fish's music is he can sing about a bleak situation, and whether that's a relationship or whether that's something he's seen on the news or whether it's something he's read, he can sing about dark times, but there's nearly always a response and there's a fight back, and he doesn't want to take it lying down, or the character, let's face it, it's usually him, isn't going to take it lying down, wants to get up and fight and spit back and get angry about it and not be overrun by the things around him. And that's what this song is on this album for me. It's about I've had some shit, but I'm going to stand up and give it back to whoever gave it to me, and probably double and back to everybody else as well. And that cathartic response is what I've always loved in Fish's lyrics and Fish's music, because that's what I want out of music. I don't want misery, I don't want Radiohead gloom.
I knew you were going to say that.
I want get up and give it back, and this is probably the album highlight for me. And live it was great. It got everybody up on their feet, stamping their feet, clapping their hands.
Yeah, we're all angry with you.
Yeah, loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. So I love this song. I think it's great. I'm really glad I've gone back to listening to it, because I'll be shouting for it on the upcoming tour. We're not going to get it, but who cares? I'm going to shout for it anyway.
Yeah,
Stuart, what do you think?
I think it's interesting because I thought when I listened to this that this is what the song out of the whole of the album that points to what comes next. This could have been on 13 Star. It's got that vibe to it. And if there was one thing that really surprised me about this whole album, which was looking at it, is that Steve Vancis didn't write a single track on it or didn't contribute to a single track.
Yeah.
And yet this feels like a very Steve Vancis song. This feels
That's a
like
good
exactly
point, yeah.
where they went.
Yeah.
And I was just amazed to think that the next album we got after this was 13 Star, I think.
Yeah,
And this felt like you could transplant this onto that album and it would have fitted, possibly because of the anger that you're talking about, because of that sort of power behind it. But it did also mean that it sort of surprised me that how quickly Steve Vancis went from working on the occasional song, not at all on this album, to literally being the powerhouse behind the last 3 Fish albums.
It's the continuum, isn't it? It's this track could have gone on 13 Star, and there's probably a track or two on here that could have gone on whatever came before this one, which
Fellini Days.
And that kind of link up from one album to the next, and those continuing themes. It's fascinating, really.
Yeah, I like the which kind of fits with that, the dramatic changes in it. So you've got your heavy rock, but then you've got it, if I've got the right song, and then you've got it some flowing, beautiful notes on the piano, which contrast but yet work together. And I think that builds the whole thing up. Am I talking about the right song?
I think so.
Craig's nodding.
I think it's, it's another good rocker on this album, and I love the next track. So this kind of sets up the next track, and that falls into what Stuart's just been talking about. Because "Shot the Crow" could easily have been on 13th Star for me. It's a beautiful melody, great chorus.
But do you know what a craw is? I had to ask that. Everybody was asking that question. Do you remember?
It's a phrase.
What's
Shot
a
the crow.
craw? Okay.
It's like to means
Missed
to
the
get the fuck out of here, basically.
yeah.
To run away.
Okay. Because we didn't know that, and we were looking at the craw, and apparently, it's a bird's stomach, which wasn't overly helpful to us understanding the song.
It's a Scottish thing,
Ah, there we go. No hope for us.
I thought it was a sort of self-inflicted wound to be shot in the craw. I thought
It probably can be.
that's the way I've always taken it in this context.
I don't. I mean,
Bearing in mind,
the chorus
maybe
is all
there's
about a dance
this
without
feeling.
you. So the person, you've lost the person, and they moved on.
I find it very emotional.
I've always thought it was sort of by analogy, it was a bit like cutting off your nose to spite your face. But try and fit that into a song. Hey.
Yeah, I find it a very emotional song, beautiful, but very powerful.
Google
Again, it's another slow one, isn't it?
Mm.
Well, I'm just Grasnet's got. They're looking for us. It looks like it's time to shoot the craw.
To get out of here.
Yeah.
So, according to my quick Google of it as we speak, shoot the craw is a Scots phrase that means go away. Explanation: the word craw has several meanings in Scots, and this could also affect a fish thing. A strong desire to drink, especially after a night of drinking. I mean, that could be any number of fish gigs. To get into trouble with bad associates. Yep, that's it's like check. To sit in the dark. And then the one that maybe is the least likely, a man who sits on the eaves of a corn stack to pass sheaves from a cart to a builder.
Oh, yeah.
It's all these multiple meanings, isn't it? So
That last one, that would be an awesome song, wouldn't it?
For Jethro Tull, yeah,
folk.
maybe.
It would be folk.
The Jethro Tull track, yeah.
So thank you for clearing
the
that
man
up.
who sits and passes the corn.
wow.
Any other views on Shot the Craw?
I love it. I just think it's the thing that Fish does nicely. It's when he does take that slightly orchestrated, and there is, we're talking about folk music. There is almost a vibe of that about it, and I think that is when he embraces things that are slightly different from him. And I'm thinking of things like "Out of My Life" as well. It's little things from all the way through his history where he goes into these slightly different musical styles. I really like, and I think this is again because it's pitched so nicely for him. It could have been a terrible song if it'd been recorded the way that much of Fellini Days is recorded. I think it wouldn't have worked. But because it's got this sort of really sympathetic production on it, even the old version has a really nice piece of production on it. I think it works really well.
Okay, final track of the album, "Scattering Crows."
Epic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great tune.
Probably my favourite, along with The Lost Plot.
I mean, we're not going to argue about this point, are we? It's epic. It's brilliant. It's
It's Tony.
Sorry, you are Andrew Barnsley Wood, and I claim my £5.
Who, me?
What?
Yeah. Every time he comes on the pod, he says the word epic. Every minute.
He's a great person. I love his honey very much, or at least I would if he ever sent me a pot of it, but he hasn't.
It's very nice, yeah.
I'm sure he's listening.
No, it's a beautiful song. Absolutely love it. Perfect ending to the whole album, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a better ending than what The Field would be, John. So there you go.
But it is, but The Field feels like it's a last track. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it would be a better last track. It just feels like the end of a side or the end of an album. Whereas this, with the shot and the crows, is brilliant. I'll be scattering crows at the end. It really, really builds to a crescendo.
When you listen to it properly, in really quiet space, that the sound of those crows and the shot are just so powerful that sometimes it makes my hair stand on end because you can really imagine being in that field. I think, yeah, I just think it's perfect ending.
Yeah.
But what or who is getting shot?
Oh, I was about to ask that. There are thoughts that it says about suicide. I'm not sure that I agree
Fish
with
says
that.
in the notes of the remaster, as I'm sure John will now look up because he can see where he's sat, that he moved the chair. He never thought of himself. I'm not pissed, you know.
Oh, so I was very drunk at the time.
Even in his darkest times, he never thought of himself as a suicide risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've always listened to that and thought, that's dark. You know, that's really introspective, self-doubting, dark. It hasn't got that fight back that, you know, a lot of the songs have, like I was saying just now. And
Well,
actually, it's something that came to be a bit more common in some of Fish's later songs, where it was dark without the anger and without the fight back. I could tell you about a gig I was at once where
on the Wikipedia page, it's called Scattering Crows, open brackets, Still Time. I don't know where that comes from because it's not in the lyric book.
Ooh.
And that leads you to a different sort of ending to what you just suggested, doesn't it? Really? But
Interesting.
The lyric goes, "Have we still got time, or do we still have
Yeah.
time?" But is it still, as in not moving, time? See,
Oh,
you're back to another homonym, aren't you?
Is the wine kicking in now, Taff? Yeah?
Is this Fish's darkest song then, Taff?
Oh no.
No.
Oh no.
That's a whole other
no.
podcast. What's Fish's darkest song?
Oh, can we come back for that?
No,
Yeah,
I'm not up for that.
yeah.
Can I say what stand? I don't know why. Do you ever get lyrics that just stand out and you like them, but you don't really know why?
Yeah.
So I just like the bit "Still after all that's said and done, still you're the only one to touch my soul, fill my world, your magic still lingers." And I can't picture anyone in particular. There's no particular scenario for that. Those words just resonate somehow. It might be the particular melody with it, but yeah, that's what stands out for me from this song.
I wrote 20 odd years ago, I wrote, "Play this one straight after Cliche and you might see a link."
Do you know why you wrote that 20 years
No,
ago?
I haven't got a clue, and I haven't done
Wine.
it. I haven't done it since. I'm going to do that after we finish talking. I'm going to play Cliche.
You'll have to let us know.
Scattering Crows. I'll let you know.
Okay. So overall, genius or bollocks? Field of Crows.
I'm gonna have to say genius. You know, I take it all back. All this 22 years of shitting on it from a great height. I thoroughly apologize and take it all back.
Stuart?
Awesome.
It's genius, but then I probably thought that at the time. I don't think it's wavered much. That being said, it's not been one I've gone back to. It's been one I liked. As in a lot of Fish stuff, love it at the time. I play it to death, and then I don't listen to it. Or like Welshmertz, which I've listened to twice since I got it. Just for some reason, that's not resonating with me. I'll have to give it a listen before next month.
Yes. Yes. Emma?
I'm guessing those are the only two options we're not allowed to say on the fence.
That's right.
Genius.
Thank you.
I'm positive about most things, aren't I?
Yeah. Taff?
Genius.
Thank you.
It might be slightly flawed in parts, and
No. Stop talking. Stop talking.
No, it might be. But
Damn it.
Have you ever tried stopping Taff to talking?
Just try it now. It's quite entertaining.
the remastered version is total genius, and I think when you listen to it all, and you kind of try and get your head around the concept of, you know, this crow character, the assassin, sniper, whatever it was, I think when you listen to it and you get to the more personal stuff that's kind of in the second half, mainly, who do you think that crow character is? You know, it's a bit like Torch on Clutching at Straws, isn't it? You know, everyone knew that Clutching at Straws, although it was written about this Torch fella, was actually about Fish, you know. And most of the songs after that were fairly straightforward about him. And this one, although it's written in part about a character looking out to go and settle scores and get even with people, and then sing about heartbreak and fighting back and catharsis and all that kind of stuff. It's about him again, isn't it? So it might be written ostensibly as fiction about somebody else. Is it bollocks? We know what it's about, don't we? It's Fish expressing his views on his life, his situation, and what's around him. And in that, it's genius.
And listeners, those views were brought to you by a bottle of dry white wine.
Can,
I just want to finish Genius or Bollocks because I haven't had my say.
Oh.
I'm pretty much like Craig, though. 2 weeks ago, this was Bollocks. It's now Genius. It completely changed my view on the record. I nearly said what my least favourite Fish album was then, but I'm not going to because we've not done it.
Whisper.
No.
Can I mention something that we haven't spoken about with regards to the band?
Yeah.
And it's someone who appeared on 6 tracks of it, and I loved him when he toured with him, and is Danny Gillan.
Yeah, he was
male backing vocals.
Backing
nothing
vocals,
against any of Fish's female backing vocalists, who most of whom are great, but the male backing vocals just boosted his vocal thing so much, and I thought Danny was great. I looked him up. I tried to find out what he's doing now, and there is a Danny Gillan who's still gigging in Edinburgh, and that's the closest I could get. I don't know if that's him, but he doesn't appear like he's done anything else. If you look at the link to him, it links into someone who is definitely not him. Like Discogs has got Danny Gillan, and you look at it, and it's a guy who was a guitarist who sadly has passed away, but he's definitely the wrong age, so it's I'm pretty certain it's not him.
He was really young, wasn't he? On the tour,
he was
he?
He was quite young on the tour, yeah.
Pardon? Yeah,
he was quite young on the tour. He was only in his 20s,
20s,
wasn't he?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
His parents came to one of the gigs. I can remember that.
Have we got that?
I think I have.
The Scattering Crows DVD?
Yeah.
From Bradford, of all places.
Oh, yeah. I got it up there. I can't reach it.
I was there.
That was a weird gig. Yeah, we were there. It was the weirdest gig ever.
It's a strange one to record, I have to say. Yeah. I watched it all the other day. I really enjoyed it.
It was added in late. It was added late to the tour specifically to be recorded because I think the rest of the venues weren't suitable or cost too much to record in or whatever it was. So they added Bradford just to do a video shoot. And as I recall, it wasn't the best attended gig of the tour.
No.
Because it had gone on sale late and probably a lot of people have bought tickets for other places, for Liverpool or Manchester or wherever it was. And it wasn't that crowded, but it was expertly shot to make it look
all you can see is the back of heads. There's no other kind of crowd shot.
Yeah, back of my head.
You can see my hair. But what was strange sorry.
This is where me and John have conversations over the artwork, because the artwork for the album, I love both the album cover and the Scattering Crows cover. But John, you wish that they'd use the Scattering Crows cover as the main album cover.
Stronger image with his arms open and the coat flailing out behind him. I just think it's stronger than this. And the other thing, I'm not a graphic designer by any means, but he's off center. What's that all about?
Oh no, I like that because he's moving forward. You can see him.
He is in the book. He
does. Yeah.
It's because
it looks like he's going to knock on somebody's door and ask if he knows where Sarah Connor is.
It's because that's a cropped down version of the full picture, and the full picture is very similar to Van Gogh's picture where he's off center. I think
of course it is. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah.
Well, it still bothers me, and I still think the other image is better. I think that's far better.
I think they're both good. I like the fact that he went completely different and took that random alternative way of doing it, really.
But I think the sleeve affects what I think of the thought of the album at the time, though. It's not the strongest image, I didn't think.
No, but I think he said he wanted it to reflect moving on and kind of a passage from one era to the next.
Right.
And that picture of him walking across a field which is reflected in the lyrics as well, was really meant to reflect the bigger concept, man.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about the tour? In fact, to go back a step,
Mm.
we talked about Danny Gillan on the album.
Mm.
Can we just run through who was on the album? Mark Brzezicki's on drums.
On the
Francis
album,
on
not on the
bass.
On
tour.
the album only, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bruce Watson on guitar and Ebo. Frank Usher on guitar and slide guitar. Stevie Vancis on bass. Tony Terrell on keyboards. And Irving plays one track, plays clavinet on hang on Old Crow. But
I
for
don't
the
really know
tour,
what a clavinet sounds like.
I
Oh
don't
gosh,
know.
I don't know how to describe it.
It's I don't know. If
Very
you know,
specific
listeners,
sound.
please put it in the comments below.
I think you have to hear it rather than try to describe it.
Yeah, I can imagine it, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a wonky acabilk in my head.
Wonky milk.
Well, it's got to read like somewhere
Like a
like
clarinet.
like a clarinet.
Yeah. Yeah,
No, it
there you
hasn't.
go.
It's a keyboard.
What are we
Oh,
talking
the
about? Oh, come
sound,
on.
the sound is a keyboard that
Yeah.
sounds like a clarinet in
Yeah.
my head.
Yeah.
We've been through the key characters on the album, so we're just going to talk a little bit about the tour. So, as we said, what's that? Oh yeah, yeah, it's a keyboard. Oh, it's a keyboard, man.
It's an electric clavichord invented. I just know this off the top of my head, mind. I'm not reading it.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want your listener to know I'm not reading this off Wikipedia. It was invented by Ernst Zacharias, and I think it was manufactured by the Hohner company, who did violin bass guitars of Trossingen, West Germany, from 1964 to 1982. The instrument produces sounds with rubber pads, each matching one of the keys and responding to a keystroke by striking a given point on a tensioned string, and was designed to resemble the Renaissance era clavichord.
Oh,
Can I just say, I said I was feeling ill at the beginning of this. I genuinely thought we were talking about a clarinet.
no,
I'm very
clavinet.
confused,
Clavinet.
but please move on without me.
Why did Hair Flick come into the podcast at some point there?
Because it was in West Germany.
Okay, okay.
That's both your listeners from West Germany gone.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's usually the Polish that people get pissed off by. So
We're an equal opportunities offender. We offend everybody. The tour, 2003.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about it. Where did you go then?
So we, Taff and I, as mates at the time, did 14 gigs, which for some people is outrageous. Other people think it's quite normal, but for us at the time, that was something huge. I don't remember this, obviously, but it's written down. We did the 14 gigs, met up. I actually worked it out, met up with over 100 friends during those 14 gigs.
Wow.
And we only slept in one hotel due to the generosity of fans across Europe and back at home. So it was the only time I've done something that big. And I can remember people at work saying, I just don't get it. I just don't understand it. It's the same gig, the same songs. And the way I used to describe it is, it's just different. You could feel different. Fish, let's not say too much about this, but can be in a different mood every gig. The sound quality can be different. The atmosphere, the gig can be terrible. You could be drunk or sober. The person next to you can be drunk or sober. Every single gig was completely different. People really struggled to understand that, which isn't surprising because it is a weird idea, isn't it? To go and do this.
Not to people who listen to this. No, it's
No,
not.
well, no. So
Weird.
we called it losing the plot tour for obvious reasons.
Okay.
I won't go through where it was, but basically we went the funniest one was the first one of the tour. So the 13th of February was cancelled in Edinburgh, which unlucky for some on the 13th. This was the 14th of February, and I can't remember where it was, but it was a library. Can you remember where it was?
Darwin.
Darwin
Darwin
Library
Library.
Theatre, yeah.
Were you there as well?
No, I'm
Okay.
reading it from Setlist FM, but yeah.
It's
It's the
Lancashire. He wouldn't go over the border.
It's the worst gig I've ever been to in respect of seating. It was in a library, weird library place, and we think people behind us had season tickets thinking they were coming to see a play called Fish. And we stood up immediately to dance at the first song and got an old lady tapping us on the shoulder saying, "Sit down, sit down." And it kind of went from there. In the end, Fish did say to everyone stand up, please, which was awesome because then you don't feel guilty. But there were lots of Norwegians involved, and I remember lots of single chairs sort of flying around at the end of it. It was a very, very odd night to start the tour with. Have you got any other feedback on that, Taff?
Well, I remember the chairs being fixed, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
it was very strange, and I think you're right that old dears got their season ticket and didn't quite know what to expect, and the tour did go some weird places. I mean, if Darwin isn't weird enough, the following night was Wrexham. I mean, people don't go to Wrexham for fun; they go there for a sentence.
They
was
go to Wrexham now.
It was Preston.
There's a good reason to go to
Oh,
Wrexham
did I
now.
miss Preston? Okay, yeah,
Preston.
but yeah, the night after that was Wrexham, and why the hell would anybody go there? It was desperate.
And that was very odd. It was a very, very low stage to the point where it's just a tiny step. So all you had to do is be behind someone slightly tall, and you couldn't see a thing. And my notes did say that Sandy
Stage
tried to
dived.
stage dive, but tripped up and sort of landed on his face. So it's things like that that really stand out from tours because you still talk about them now when you all get together. But otherwise we did Bilston, London. We
Yeah.
did a couple in Holland. That was awesome. We went to stay with a good friend Yo-Yo. Was one in Belgium that she drove
Yep.
through the snow over
Yeah,
to Belgium.
we did Verviers in Belgium
Yeah,
I'm
recently.
glad you said that
66,
because I
yeah.
couldn't pronounce it. And then Utrecht was amazing because the atmosphere there was off the scale. Also, I think that was before the ban on smoking indoors, so those gigs were always a little bit more different. Um, but then back home, it was sort of more local to us, Southampton, Bristol, Cardiff. Um, and Bristol was brilliant because it was the beginning of the Company Gloster, which was never really meant to be a big thing. It was me, Taff, and a couple of locals going, shall we just get together and, talk about fish occasionally? And it became into this bigger thing, which was only for fun. There was nothing and other than fun about it, but it was the beginning of that. And sadly, we've lost a friend recently. I expect you all knew about Cora, and he was from Norway, but he loved this whole concept of the Company Gloster, and it wasn't about Gloucester in the end. It was about this massive group of friends who connected through something. So
Yeah.
actually, that was the first time we got minibus down to Bristol. So that's significant to us, really. Otherwise, yeah, then we ended up Liverpool. And then we've talked about the Bradford Town and Country Club and finished off Edinburgh and Glasgow, which was awesome. And apparently in Glasgow, Dave Squeaky Stewart started playing drums. We haven't mentioned anything about the drum issue during this tour, have we?
Oh, Wilson. Is it Wilson?
No,
Watson. Sorry.
Windsor,
No, Windsor McGilvray.
McGilvery.
Yes.
Let's just politely say he wasn't very good. And Tonksy took over.
Well, he's on. He's on now.
Is he?
Yeah, he's on.
Yeah,
This is
we
Bilston. This bonus disc is Bilston.
yeah,
Okay.
Windsor managed
Oh.
4, 5.
yeah, I was going to say
Okay.
half a dozen gigs, but I mean, it wasn't a bad drummer. I think he just didn't fit with the way the band liked to work. And fair play to Fish, they managed him out of the band. They nabbed Tonks from the Barrow to the support, and John's a very good drummer in anybody's book. And Windsor had a tactical injury that meant he got the next flight home, and has gone on to bigger and better things.
Oh, I see. Well,
Last
that's
heard off
good.
playing in a Genesis tribute band with Tony Turrell. So
I didn't know that.
he's
That's
done all
awesome.
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, John was a bloody good drummer by anybody's measure. And I really rated him. The best gig on the tour, of course, was Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Without shadow of a doubt. It was in a little basement just round the corner from the castle. The I think there must have been another support as well, unless I'm getting
Wasn't
my
it Joe?
notes
It wasn't Joe that
confused.
time.
Joe, if this is the first part of the tour, the 2003, Joe did
This is
the tour.
2004.
Oh
No,
no,
it's
no.
2004.
It was
This
the
is
second one.
it's the
It was
liquid rooms.
it was April the 7th,
It was the liquid rooms, yeah.
April the 7th, 2004, because I met that lovely creature sat to my right, just over there.
Oh, was that when it was?
Yeah,
Oh,
Mhm.
awesome.
We
during
was
internal exile at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah, the place is burnt down now, so it can't be repeated.
What
But
by you? Are you anything to do with that?
no, I didn't burn it.
All right,
It
okay.
burnt down when the sensational Alex Harvey band were on stage, and they had to run off carrying their instruments as the place burnt down behind them a few years later. But yeah, 7th of April, 2004, Edinburgh Liquid Rooms. I met that lovely thing, and she's still putting up with me now.
It's a very
we was
important date for you.
we were
I'm
staying
trying
with
to
Mo
work.
and Pete, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember what dates did we do, John? I know we did Camden Palace in
We
London.
did, yeah.
The thing is, as well, is I can't remember. Did we do any of those gigs in? Did we go up to Glasgow or
No,
Edinburgh? I don't think we did on that.
no,
I think we
no.
just did the earlier ones. I don't think we
We
did
did,
much on that.
and I think it. I can't remember how we felt at the time, but I'm sure the reception of the album had something to do with us not going up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've got written down about Glasgow. I don't really remember it, but it was the end of the tour. So it was Days of Yatta, wasn't it? Who
Yes,
had to
Mhm.
do
yeah.
pranks. I mean, I don't think he dressed up as a woman this time, which is unusual. But apparently they put talcum powder on the drum, so that obviously every time he hit it, it was flying everywhere. And I don't know why Squeaky did a stint on the drums just because he was local and had a go, I guess. I don't know. I can't think of what other pranks
I
they did.
presume John Tonks was pretty knackered by that point because he
Yeah,
played
yeah.
2 sets a night, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. That was what was phenomenal. And he was an incredibly fit person, as in fit, healthy. But yeah, I want to say about the drumming that although we're not saying Windsor was a bad drummer, that was unfair of
No,
me. The contrast in the drumming style was phenomenal.
I
So
think he's a lot more. I recall him as being sort of very like John Keeble, or he really hits the drums
yeah,
and he.
the
Yeah, he
power.
does. He
Yeah,
he hits a drum like he's trying to bash it through the floor, not just trying to bounce a stick off it.
Yeah,
and the power of that suddenly makes the whole venue erupt, and it means you've got much more of an atmosphere as well. And it obviously the drums keeping the beat is so important for the entire band. So that's kind of what wasn't quite right with Windsor. And I think it actually, I mean, people were saying that Togs saved the tour. I think that's a bit harsh, but it was, it was definitely very different and very, very much more positive.
yeah. Is
Well,
it Windsor's not in a Genesis tribute band now, is he? I don't think.
I wouldn't
If
know.
anybody knows where he is, please comment in the Facebook group. We'd
And
love to.
apologise for me saying he wasn't very good.
Yes, and we can forward you Emma's email address if you need to pass on
Yeah,
to
All the
thanks for
hate
her.
mail.
John Tonks is partially responsible for my coming up for 20-year-old relationship now, because the next tour after this was the Return to Childhood tour, and he was the keyboard player then. And when they played Aberdeen, they played a small venue called Drummond's.
Drummer.
Sorry, yeah, not keyboard player, drummer. And when they played Drummond's, he was on tour in Italy with Never the Bride and had to fly over, and the flight was delayed. So they were all set up and ready to go, but he wasn't there. So I had to go to the airport to pick him up. And Ellie, who I had just met an hour or two before, came with me, and then we ended up getting together. And that's
The rest is
having
history.
having got to pick him up, completely forgetting what his name was, which was very bad, and having to hold up a sign saying "Fish Drummer."
But I also love the fact there was a pause when you said I had to go. I thought you were going to say I had to play the drums instead.
Yeah, I took over, and it was amazing. No,
It was best thing ever.
it was a really it was a good night. It was a good. I mean, like, I guess I'd say this. We did this tour, didn't he? And then he did Childhood for a few years, so there wasn't really any new stuff. This was the last
Yeah.
time.
was the
I
This
last
is
think
one of the last. It was just we were
purely
talking.
original
This is
tours, wasn't it? Yeah.
yes, this is one of the last of the purely original tours. There was only this tour and the feast, like the movable feast tour after this, which were just original material. The rest of the stuff kind of got into mixing like misplaced and clutching at straws with the new material at the time.
Are you going to say to me what you said earlier
Oh, what did I say earlier? I can't remember.
about him? No, I'm not saying it because we'll clip it and send it to him. He didn't want to become.
Oh yes, the chicken in the basket thing. Yes.
you know, I think it was the Glasgow and Edinburgh gigs might have been the last time I saw Andy Westmoreland as well,
Well,
just
funny
before
enough,
he.
I was chatting to him today, and I said, "How long is it since we've seen each other?" Because he's coming to Glasgow, and I was expecting him to say probably a decade or so, because that seems to be the figure we keep sort of mentioning about how long it's been. And he said, "I think it's 20 years." And I was
Yeah,
like,
that would be right. I think that's the last time I saw him was those gigs.
So what's I mean, this is going off on a tangent, but what's so awesome about what's going on at the moment is that I feel back when we were doing these tours, and obviously since, it was very much we were involved in it regularly all the time. And then as we've got older, it's natural that there's been a separation away from that slightly. We get together occasionally at gigs or conventions, and it's brilliant, but we've never all been together. And suddenly these friendships that were so special to us, we haven't lost, thankfully, to Facebook and so on, but suddenly we're all getting in touch, and the emotion and the excitement is phenomenal. And no offense to Fish, it's not all about the music. It is about the music, it is about Fish, but for us it's this sense of almost like the end. It's like saying goodbye to something which for many of us has molded our lives and been so important to us. Does that make any sense? I mean, that's a bit over
Oh, it
dramatic.
is. I mean, one of the things that we found with doing the podcast as well. I mean, we're reaching out to a lot of our friends again who we haven't seen for a while, and it's getting a lot of the community kind of back together. And there's so many friends who have contacted us since we've been doing the pod, and wanting to catch up and things like that. And it's been a great thing for us.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. And the people I forget have said they're going to be there. I know what it's like. I'll see them go, "Oh, this is just so great to see you all." The only downer is that whole ending. We're going to have an ending where actually we all go our own way and go, when is this ever going to happen again? And obviously there'll be lots of get-togethers in a different way, but this is yeah, Taff's doing the eye crying thing because it is going to be emotional.
Well, it
Uh,
is, but it's slightly lessened by the fact that we're going to go to Holland that same week as he ends, isn't it?
but
You
do you know
can.
what?
Speak for yourself, guys.
Well, all right. Some of us are going to Holland.
I see that as something completely different, which is interesting, isn't it? That I separate that out. Pun intended. So, um, but I do. I see the two things as different. The fish crowd and the marine crowd. I
I
know
think
there's crossover.
your friend group is different with fish to Marillion, isn't it? I don't think
Yes.
ours is particularly.
That'll be the difference for you guys then. For me, there's definitely big crossovers. But the things we've done for Marillion are very different style than the things we've done for Fish, and there is some separation there. The two things are flipping awesome. But for me, this is the end of doing things fish wise, and seeing a lot of people who'd never go to Marillion concerts, who are missing out, in my opinion. And it's going to be absolutely amazing, but equally, yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're going to go home and have a bit of a slump. But like you say, or go to Port Zealand and manage it there, drown our sorrows.
Yeah.
But
And I
Come
think
down
to
in a
round,
different way. But is it
yeah.
really the end?
Oh, don't ask that question. Do you know
no,
what? 20 years ago, this review says we were really sad at this gig because Fish suggested this was his last ever tour. 20 years ago. So he always did that, didn't he? He regularly said,
he'll be back in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure. I don't think this is the end because I don't think he can not be on stage and not have people tell him how amazing he is.
"Oh,
Yeah, that was
and
yeah.
I'm not necessarily meaning that in a negative fashion. It's what he's done for his whole life. It's
Well,
part and
that's
parcel.
one of the
right."
things that we discussed in the second part of our review of last year. I think it was Martin who brought that up, and he was quite accurate on what he said about Fisher's personality and the need for the limelight, and then to go away to somewhere so remote and things like that. The lights from across the water might tempt him back for a few bits and bobs. Not what he was doing, but something new.
I think you're
I
right.
mean,
That craving is there it's like anything that someone's done all their life because they're passionate about it. That's not going to go. So I think he's going to be going through some sort of grieving process about walking away from so much, being so
Maybe.
remote. But I think he said, hasn't he, that he might still do the odd
he has.
little gig or
He
two.
won't be on the scale.
No,
I
it won't be
wouldn't be
too.
surprised if he does a Haddington type thing where he'll book somewhere and we'll all turn up and it'll be great. But I mean, it must be galling as well for him because he's getting playing the biggest venues he's played in decades. In our city in Aberdeen, he's nearly sold out 1,200 capacity, and yet he couldn't sell out a 300 capacity 10 years ago. It's things have changed, that's a
Well,
great thing.
it's
Yeah.
folks know it's the last time that sells tickets.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it is just the last time, and every time it's going to be the last time then.
Well,
So I was going to say, to round out as well, we need to round out the Field of Crows,
Sorry.
because that's okay, because you haven't gone through what you normally do. Go through quickly, John, is the track listing of
the
the
formats and the track listing. Yeah, okay.
formats and the
You
track
want to do
listing.
the original track listing, Craig? Have you got that?
Right. Yeah, original track listing. I'll just bring that up. Is the field, then, well, we've already gone through the album. Field, moving targets, the rookie, zoo class, lost plot, old crow numbers, exit wound, innocent party, shot the crow, and scattering crows.
Okay, and then
Onto the disc on the remasters.
well,
Um,
it's important to say that the remastered disc one is the
it's just
remix.
the album. Yeah, it's the
The
remix
remix, though,
of Chris by Chris Kimsey.
yeah,
And disc two's your demos and live stuff. Now, aren't the demos? There's only 4 demos on it, and they're actually
three,
instrumentals, aren't there?
three
Was that
demos.
3? That's 3.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, Lost Plot, Scattering Crows, and the Field.
yeah. And then you've got live tracks, really, which at the time he put out Scattering Crows, which is a double disc live set from mainly from Bradford, but with some Bilston tracks on it. And then there was a bonus disc, which is purely Bilston that you could get at the same time, but you had to order everything together. So you had to order the DVD and the double CD to be able to get the free bonus disc, um, just for extra sales.
I think you'll
Right.
find some of those were actually recorded in Oslo, John.
No, I think on here they were, not this. Yeah, these.
Oh yeah, on
I'm finished.
the bonus for the remaster.
Yes. So as Taff's just said,
Sorry, did I spoil the surprise?
yeah, it's fine, mate. So first 3 tracks are demos, as Craig says, all instrumentals. Lost Plot, Scattering Crows, The Field. Then you've got The Rookie, Moving Targets, Innocent Party, Zoo Class, Numbers, and I think it's Old Crow and Lost Plot.
Lost Plot. Yeah.
They're from somewhere else. And then there are some tracks from Communion on here as well, I think. The Field, Shot the Crow, Lost Plot, and Scattering Crows. And then some tracks from the Scattering Crows album, Innocent Party, Moving Targets, The Rookie, Zoo Class, Numbers, and Innocent Party again. So different live tracks, all much of a muchness, if I'm honest. The remix is what it's worth getting for.
Get it while there's still some stock
Yeah.
left.
As the
There's
deluxe
not
is
stock
going,
of many of them.
it's not the best one, but it's cool. So we asked you what you thought of Field of Crows back on the 18th of January, and thanks very much for all your comments. We had loads of comments again. It really is great to read the comments. So Craig and I will just give you some of the highlights now.
I'll start with our friend Darren Moore. For me, it felt like the closest Fish had got to a true concept album since he left Marillion. There was a story to it that works all the way through the album. I wrote a long piece on it back in the day on another forum, lost now, but I remember at the time being really into it. Did a few shows on that tour.
Yep. And Craig Houston says, "Can I get a note from my mum excusing me from schoolwork this week?"
I stuck it out.
You did, as we've proved. Mike Barton says, still love this. The tour. Remember that library gig in Darwin, which elicited lots of comments. Um, Andy McIntosh says, I travelled up on the train with a dozen pint bottles of Old Crow Stout from the brother-in-law's brewery. Not the best of ideas. And
Uh,
apparently, I think, didn't somebody try and sell fish tickets for his own gig in Darwin in the pub?
yeah, I think that's one of it could be true, could be an urban myth, but I think we've all heard it.
Yeah.
Graham Smith, definitely my least favorite Fish studio album. Struggle to listen to any of it. Well, I used to be there with you.
Rich Harding says, one of my favourite Fish albums with Bruce Watson and my Skyline Drifters bandmate Tony Terrell, keeping things generally reasonably focused, although some of the tracks outstay their welcome a little, and it's at least a track too long as an album. But that was pretty normal for the noughties. Saw a few gigs on the tour, including the UK and the Netherlands.
Mm, very nice.
Rick Gay says, this was the first tour I saw the big man live at the Empire in Belfast. The turnout was quite low and I met him backstage. He was a tad grumpy, lol. I enjoy the album, especially the drumming of Mark Brzezicki. Some great tracks on it. Not one of his best, but a solid 7 out of 10. Scattering Crows is outstanding.
Martin Jakubski. I played this one a lot when it was released and really enjoyed the Glasgow gig on the tour. While some people will argue he'd started to adjust his vocal melodies on the record to reflect the drop in his vocal range on the previous album, for me, this is one where it really happened. I don't particularly care for Zoo Class at all, and I still think Old Crow is possibly the worst song he's ever recorded. However, the album is worth the admission price for Shot the Crow alone, which is a classic in my opinion. I'll need to revisit it though, as it's easily 10 years since I've listened to it all. Yeah, I was quite close to you there on that one.
Uh, Carl Rag Regan says, I'm almost an hour into giving it my first ever listen. Liking it more than I thought I would do. The songwriting is right up my street and I really like the guitar parts. I still can't get into Fish's vocals in terms of the tone and pitching of them. Sorry, Fish fans, definitely trying my best. I want to like his voice, but I haven't yet heard anything that makes me think, whoa, what a singer. But I can absolutely appreciate his poetic lyrics and songwriting abilities. I'd written Fish off, to be honest, a few Marillion tunes being the exception, but just generally speaking, I've never been into him. Giving this a spin was quite enjoyable this morning, and I think I've been overly harsh in the past. Maybe I'll get there after all.
Just like me. Joe Makowski. No, we haven't read this one out, have you?
No, I haven't. No.
It's a real solid effort from Fish. Some great tracks on here. Hard edged, which gives me Sunset on Empire vibes, numbers in particular. The Field is a superb scene setter as an opener. Moving Target's one of his best solo efforts. Great, really great that Mark was back behind the kit. His influence is obvious. The Lost Plot and Scattering Crows are superb. Exit Wound is beautiful. It would be a 9 out of 10 for me if it wasn't for Old Crow. Just can't listen to it. It's not that bad, honest. So a strong
Mark,
8 out of 10 for me. I remember I just broken my leg and was not up and about, so got this. This got spun on a Sony Discman on repeat from recollection. I went to the Camden Underworld gig. There was some kind of issue and the set was cut short. We couldn't get parked close and had hopped on crutches to attend. I remember Frank Usher laughing as I used the crutches to applaud after set opener The Rookie. The live DVD from this tour is well worth a watch. Good memories.
absolutely. Mark Kennedy just says, yield of lows.
Yeah.
And Michael Kay says, Scattering Crows was the far superior cover, but sorry guys, nothing else positive to say. I'll look forward to the episode, but can't say I'll be giving it a spin beforehand, but you may just encourage me to do so after it airs.
We'll get the tears out. I'll make sure he does.
Peter Ryan says, I saw him at Bradford Town and Country. Very poor turnout blamed on the lack of advertising by the promoter. Filmed 50 plus minutes of this with my camcorder until the battery failed. I watch it to this day with fond memories. Well, that is the one that came out on DVD, Peter, as people have commented later on in the thread. Thanks again for all your comments. That's just a few of the highlights. We love reading them. Please, please, please contribute to the conversations in the Facebook group. And if you've not been to the Facebook group, it is Planet Marzipan Podcast Group. There is a page, but there's also a group which has got all the chat on it.
And there's a lot of chat on it. It's good banter. It's really worth having a look.
It's more of this, but it's great. Anyhow, we've talked a lot about Field of Crows. Thank you for bearing with us if you're still here. But I would just like to thank Stuart Mitchell.
Thank you for having me. But 81 podcasts before I got an invite. Just seen at 81. Come on.
Saving the best till last. Thank you, Emma Mills.
And thank you for persuading me to come on. I've managed to get out of it 5 times, haven't I? So I thought with this cold, I really have to do it. But thank you, because it's been much more relaxed and less anxious than I thought I'd be. So this has been awesome. Cheers.
You're welcome back on. We'll get you back on to do another Fish album. And thank you, Taff Jones.
Absolute pleasure. If there's an 81 podcast back catalogue, which was the best one I should start with?
Well, the one I directed Emma to, which was Yin and Yang.
Oh,
Did you? Okay.
I did, yeah. You didn't listen to it, but yes.
I have listened to some, but I
Okay.
missed that. Sorry.
Or alternatively, Mr. Rothery, Mark Wilkinson's good.
They're
I could just pick my favourite album and listen to that one.
Yeah.
You could do, yeah.
I'll try that. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Thank you for being on, and thank you very much, Craig.
Yeah.
As ever.
Good luck with the edit on this one.
Oh, it's an epic.
Yeah, I know.
Just like last week's, it's a big epic.
Have we been longer than usual, have we?
No. It'll be 10 minutes. When he's edited it, be 10 minutes. That's all it'll be.
Well, we'll take out mine and Taff stuff and you'll be fine.
Oh, dear God, no.
Three
Keeping it all in.
intros. He'll cut to Genius or Bollocks and that'll be it.
Can I just say something really, really cheesy at the end of this? But it's true. But it was so beautiful. Is that a no?
No.
Yeah.
You can cut it out. So at the end of this tour that we did, I was sat in a service station. I was absolutely broken, obviously, exhausted. And I genuinely saw a crow popping around. I know, but just jumping around or hopping around the car park. And it flew off. And I am not lying. And in the sky, it joined a magpie. Right, thank you, Taff. I think that's a beautiful moment.
If there'd been a rainbow there, it would have been perfect.
On that bombshell.
Then the small drummer boy walked in.
And shot it. He shot it.
Right, I think we need to end. John.
Hang on. On that bombshell, all that remains is to say it's good night from me.
It's good night from him.
Take care.
Thanks,
And
guys.
stay alive.
Stay alive, yeah!
Yay. Thanks for listening to Planet Marzipan Podcast. Please like and subscribe from whichever platform you get your podcasts from. You can contact us at planetmarzipanpodcast@gmail.com and check out marillion.com, fishmusic.scot for all the good stuff.